Hey everyone, it's Jordan here from SwitchWatch, and this is the review of Unknown Fate. Unknown Fate is a story of discovery, or perhaps I should say rediscovery. The story here begins as a young gentleman is minding his own business outside a home when suddenly there appears to be a shift in the weather. That's not all though, as it's soon pretty clear that reality is no longer what it seems as the world crumbles away into something very strange and peculiar, as the windfish from Zelda jumps over the road. Conveniently, the main character has lost his memory at this time, and as he wanders around this strange unknown place, he'll come across a being willing to help him. It's about our character regaining memories and you trying to understand them and piece them together. You'll come across a small variety of folk in your adventure, some of them more friendly than others, and I quite enjoyed what it had to offer, even if I found it to be a little pretentious at times, and perhaps a bit meandering during a few flashbacks. Still, it's interesting to see where it was going and where it was going to end up, and to be honest, there were a few twists and turns, and I genuinely didn't know where the story was going.
The sacred lights didn't turn on.
Unknown Fate is described as an adventure puzzle game, and without wanting to be overly insulting, I would slide it more into the walking simulator category than anything else. There's lots of walking around weird, wonderful environments, watching weird stuff happen, and then arriving at the next cutscene. The puzzling and adventure, while present at times, feels far less important than the visual experience. As you wander around the fairly linear places, you'll be doing some light platforming with the generous jump button, as well as solving puzzles using special artifacts that you'll pick up soon after starting. The first one is mapped to the shoulder button and it fires a beam of light at things. It's very easy to see what can interact with thanks to a bright white icon at where you should fire. It can be used to blow up boulders, shift platforms into places, and even defeat enemies. Yes, there is combat, but I'll get to that soon. You'll get another one later, and this will allow you to manipulate objects, moving them around. It's a steady upgrade system of nothing too new or adventurous, and puzzles do tend to feel the same after a first couple of uses of the new artifact that you get. You'll notice that things are a bit on the simplistic side, hence why I feel this is more of a walking experience than a full-blown interactive game. You're pretty much guided at every point, and it's highly unlikely that you will lose your way at any moment, or not know what to do. For me, the greatest challenge was aiming your light beam. I don't know whether it's due to the dead zone on the Joy-Cons or overzealous aiming sensitivity, but I could not accurately aim at the far-off targets until I tweaked the sensitivity much lower in the options. I advise you guys do the same too. The weakest aspect of the game for me is the combat. There are enemies that will saunter up to you, but they're almost comical in their threat. You can stun them with one function of your artifact and then hit their weak point with the beam of light. In all honesty, the combat did not need to be in this game. It's almost comical at times, and I know that's harsh, but when it's so wooden as it is here, you'll know what I mean. What I find remarkable is that Unknown Fate was developed by two brothers. Not only that, but this was their first time ever making a game and their first experience in the industry. Before that, they worked in the comic book industry before trying their hand at Unknown Fate. While I don't normally cut a game any slack no matter how many people it's made by, I think this one is a special and impressive case because the lack of experience usually shows. But not so much in this case. Yes, it's rough around the edges, but it's far better than anything I could ever dream of making, and far more experienced developers have made far worse. There is a distinct lack of polish in certain areas though, that did take the edge off the experience a fair bit. Firstly, at one point I got stuck in parts of the environment, unable to get out. I had to restart and was sent back about 20 minutes or so, which was really annoying, and I was surprised that I didn't trigger any checkpoints since a lot of stuff happened in between. I know getting stuck in the environments can happen even in the biggest of games, but the place where this happened should have been tested. It should have been an obvious catch. Other lesser things I noticed too, the transitions between cutscenes and gameplay are not the most subtle. Often the camera snaps between them, or your main character will stumble down as though he's just been plopped back into place between cutscenes. It's a bit cheap and amateurish in that area. So yeah, it lacks polish and the combat is almost laughable, but aside from that, it's a solid accomplishment in the gameplay department. If you're in for a visual experience, then I think you'll be in for a decent enough time. I really enjoyed the audio in Unknown Fate. I was surprised at just how immersive it was in pulling me into this dreamlike environment. It's very atmospheric and chilling, and it's something I noticed immediately once I stepped into the world. I was actually taken aback at how effective it was. The game is fully voice acted, but if I'm honest, it's a bit hit and miss. Some characters are fine enough, but others, like the main character, just don't have the believability to their performance. It's a little weak, but it's so much better than if there was no talking at all. I'm sure hiring voice actors would have eaten into their small budget, so I don't blame them too hard on finding the cheaper end of the voice acting talents. It's not awful by any means, but it's noticeably not what you'd find in higher budget games.
Go away, Richard. Go away. Leave her alone. Oh, Ralph. What will you do? You're just a weak human. Don't you understand what I'm doing?
I did have a few issues with the sound levels too. In certain cutscenes, the voices could be way too low and overpowered by the music, or one line of dialogue would be very high while the next one would be very low. It's not a big issue, but there was no audio options in the game to correct this, which I found very unusual. Visually, the two brothers have gone for a twisted, dreamlike world where reality is warped and what was small is now big. The game oozes style, and they've really gone creative in making things as creepy as possible. I was well impressed right off the bat, even if they may not have the visual fidelity of higher budget games. I think they've done a pretty good job, stylistically. What really brings it down to earth in a graceless heap are the textures, which, without wanting to be overly harsh, are terrible. They are some of the lowest quality textures that I've ever seen. I just can't understand why it's like this. Maybe for performance sake, or is it an oversight? Either way, when you get to the second part of the game, it really hits you just how poor they are. Performance was fairly solid. Usually with these lower budget 3D games, developers don't have the resources or willpower to smooth it out for weaker consoles like the Switch, but Unknown Fate was mostly smooth. There were a few hitches here and there, but nothing I'd be overly critical about. Unknown Fate is priced at a commendable $14.99 on the US eShop. That seems unambitious, at least in comparison to what other publishers would push for. I mean, just look at the horror show that Johnny reviewed, Fimble, which was $30. As more of a walking simulator, however, the game will have players on the fence no matter the price. I think Unknown Fate is worth it despite its simplicity and lack of polish. Sure, it's about 3 hours long with not a whole lot of replayability, but that's pretty much par for the price in these kind of games. Overall, Unknown Fate is an interesting game oozing with atmosphere and a story to tell. It was made primarily by two people, and that shows in many aspects. It's still a commendable effort though, and I found Unknown Fate to be a decently enjoyable experience despite its immediate flaws. It lacks a lot of polish in areas, and the more hands-off nature to it may not sit well with gamers who think they'll be getting something more akin to Portal or perhaps the recent Cube. It's a walking simulator first and foremost, with a bit of puzzling and a sprinkling of very, very shallow action. Those are weak points for sure, but I really enjoyed the visual weirdness, story, and atmosphere. I do wish it had better textures though, as the low resolution of those really sucked me out of the game, as did the feeble fights. I give it a 6.5 out of 10. Not too bad, but not great either. Okay guys, I hope you've enjoyed this review of Unknown Fate. Now here are a selection of our other recent reviews, so go and check those out. I've been Jordan from SwitchWatch. I'll see you guys later. Take care.